want to say this. When I was growing up, I grew up a little bit judgy. How many of you just are naturally a little bit judgy? Is anybody a little bit judgy, like naturally? Be honest about it. Like, we know. Just go ahead and let us know. I was a little bit judgy. And so I would see things that would go on. And I used a phrase all the time. And I would say this. I would say something like, I'll never do that. Anybody else say that? Like, you watch somebody else, like, I'll never do that. Like, I watched my mom. I love my mom so much. But there were times where she'd go to bed early. And I was always a night owl. I was like, when I grow up and leave the house, I will never, I'll never go to bed early. I'll do that. Do you remember when you had to nap in school with the little blue mats? And I remember being like mad as a second grader going, I will never, I'll never do that. I'll never nap. And now I look around and I go, if I could nap right now, I would. Like, if I could lay out a mat right now, I would do it. Like, you look at that, you go, I'll never do that. There's a piece of this. My mom got really excited about an appliance one time. Like, she got excited about a microwave, and I went, I will never be excited about that. And we bought an air purifier, and I lost my freaking mind a few months ago. You know what I mean? Like, I'm excited about that. And my favorite, though, is before I had kids, if we can we just all be honest about this for a second? I would judge other parents as a non-parent. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would watch other people parent, and I'd go, I'll never do that. I'd say things like, I'll never bribe my kids with money. They take all my money. You know what I mean? There's a little bit like, I'll never yell at my kids. And then we put them in a car. Then we did that. I remember saying this, like, I'll never, and this is actually like a specific one. I watched a mom in Target one time, and the kid was whining a lot. And the mom was like, I'm not going to buy you a toy. I'm not going to buy you a toy. And I watched the mom a few aisles later, and the kid had a toy. And I was like, oh, you gave in. Like, why would you ever do that? And then years later, I want to show you a picture. My daughter was begging for some sunglasses. And I was like, I'm that parent now. You know what I mean? Like, it is 100%. Like, I absolutely did that. And I kind of laughed going like, yeah, there's a piece of this when you look around, like, I'll never do that. I'll never be that. And the reason that you're wired this way, the reason that I'm wired this way, right, is whatever current version of ourselves we see, there's a reason that the future version of ourselves feels unbelievable, right? I put it in my notes to say this way, that it is hard to imagine a future version of you believing something that feels unbelievable right now, and also your life experience has taught you over and over and over and over again, right? That there's a future version of you that might believe something or see something different than you believe and see something now. And we celebrate this in a lot of areas of life. Like, you expect, especially in our culture, to grow, evolve, get better at the things that you get better at, all of those things. But when it comes to faith, there's a part of you, and if I'm really honest, that many of us, we grew up going to church or around Christianity or something version of that. You grow up, then you kind of grow out of whatever those things are. And here's what you don't do. This is what most people don't do. They don't grow out of the character development. They don't grow out of thinking that Jesus was probably a good guy. They don't grow out of that. But they grow out of like the resurrection, beyond natural kind of stuff on it. And some of you deconstructed your faith when you got to like your 20s, right? Or maybe your 30s, you had like a high school biology teacher and it all kind of came crumbling down. And what you did is, and here's what you did. You took Christianity and you extracted all of the stuff that you liked about it and believed about it away from the resurrection. And you pulled it into a version of your life that ultimately, and again, you wouldn't say this out loud, but this is what we tend to do, is we make whatever best moral version of Christianity we can have with ourselves at the center of being God of that, right? And here's how you know this, right? Because when you read the Bible, there are parts of it you disagree with, and you figured out a way to explain away what it says, and you go, I just don't think that's, I don't think that's true. And what you do is you pull that out. You really, and again, this is what's fascinating. This is true for a lot of people, especially in America, that are followers of Jesus, is you can be a Christian, seemingly, without even acknowledging, feeling, or believing the power of the resurrection in your life. And you look back and you go like, the version that I was handed as a kid, you grew out of, and for some of you, a lot of good reasons, but then you came into it and you graduated in some ways out of that, just like you maybe stopped believing in, we won't fill in those blanks with kids in the room, but you're like, whatever that is, and then you moved here and you look around and you go, well, if it's not that, then I've moralized a version of Christianity that I feel comfortable with, but what you've ultimately done is place yourself at the center as God of your own life and extracted the pieces of Christianity that feels moral. And the problem with that is not at all what Jesus came to die for. And it's not at all what really billions of people around the world today are celebrating. Because if Christianity is true, right, if the resurrection actually happened, then it changes everything for us in our lives. But if it didn't, the scriptures are no more than a really great podcast episode that you listen to about something else anyway. And the problem with that is it's not all equally applicable. So you get through mid-Leviticus, you're like, I don't know, I think I'd rather Joe Rogan. Like, there's a little bit of that where you look at, you go, like, I'm going to leave that behind. And when you do that, come on, just say, that is not Christianity. That is a different version of it altogether. And here's why. And can I just say this out loud? You have, many of you, good reason for why you've done it, because a lot of the pieces of scripture that I think Christianity hinges on, it feels unbelievable. And maybe you don't hear pastors say this very often on Easter Sunday. A lot of it feels and is unbelievable. Like, to think that this happened in the way that the writer said it. These firsthand accounts of these stories and then passed down from the next generation of people who often put it down on paper. Like, it feels like it is unbelievable. And the truth of the matter is, it is unbelievable, and it's not just unbelievable in 2026. It's unbelievable to the people that were closest to Jesus and experienced most of this firsthand. It was unbelievable to them. And the reason it's unbelievable, and you know this, I don't even have to teach this, but you know it, because dead people don't come back most of the time after a certain amount of time, right? Like, dead people don't come back. Like, if you saw somebody that had, if Abraham Lincoln walked in the room, you'd go, number one, wow. Number two, wow. You know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of, like, you'd feel all these sorts of things, because dead people don't come back, right? The other one, if you're really honest about this, come on, be really honest. Religion feels outdated, or at least the version of religion that you've been given oftentimes. It doesn't even feel helpful sometimes. Religion feels outdated to many people, and many people who are followers of Jesus, they don't say this out loud, because you wouldn't say this out loud. But it feels outdated to you too. You don't want to go to hell, and you prayed a prayer to make sure that you didn't. But on the other side of this, religion still doesn't feel like it's helpful sometimes. It feels outdated to many of us. And then the other one is this. Now, I'm a little bit of a NASA geek. I'm the Artemis stuff. I am all about. I am like glued. Like, it's fascinating to me. Did y'all hear about the toilet thing? By the way, this has nothing to do with the talk. Did y'all hear about this? If you haven't, you should Google that. Not in the middle of my sermon, but later. All right, so science explains it. There's a piece of this that I think is fascinating, right? If science can't explain it away, right? And until science can explain it, come on, you know this, then I won't believe it. And what's always fascinating me about this, because I have a lot of friends who, are in different fields, specifically tethered to the scientific world. There's a component of this where I love the language of it. One of the smartest people I know, he said, ultimately, science is the language of God that is expressed in the world. But when you hinge everything here, it can feel like science and faith are at a contradiction, and they're just not, right? And so you've pulled back because science can't explain certain things, whatever that is. And then the other one that's fun for me to talk about, and I always think it's fascinating, is like the church has a lot of baggage. And it used to get talked about like the church had baggage like way back in like the Crusades and all that kind of stuff, which is very true. But like 2026 isn't super helpful either, you know what I mean? Like, if you have a Twitter account, except for Josh, everybody else, like, like there are pieces of this where you look around and you go like, there's like these weird things that are attached to this thing that is supposed to represent Jesus in the world, these people, and it feels like it's like baggage to it. So you look around at it and you go, there must be a version of adult faith that doesn't require me to engage in those things. And for some of you that are followers of Jesus, you've been a follower of Jesus since you were like 5, 6, 7 years old, what many people have done is they just put it in a box. And you would still say that you're a Christian, like 60-ish% of the U.S. But Jesus isn't like Lord of your life. In fact, Jesus isn't even necessary for the life that you live. And the resurrection is a component of Christianity that hasn't made its way fully through to you. And I get it, because most people end up rejecting Christianity, even followers of Jesus, because it sounds or feels or looks or seems or figure out whatever, word you want to put there, it feels unbelievable. And so here's what I'm going to say, and here's kind of the premise of today. If you're here and you're agnostic, you're atheist, you're curious about faith, or if you've taken Christianity, I don't know how to say this any better, but you've taken Christianity and you've packaged it into something that it was never meant to be. You've taken all the teeth away from it. You really put yourself as the person who is God in your own life, and you've taken the morality of Christianity and attached to that. If that's you, right, what I'm going to say today is, I'm going to talk about the resurrection. That's where we're going to go in the text. But the question isn't, is it believable? Right? I think the question is, did it actually happen? And why do smart people think that it did? All right? Did this actually happen? Because Christianity's claim is not that it hinges on it hinges on one thing. It doesn't hinge on everything else. It hinges on one thing, which is the resurrection of Jesus. And so we go like, did it actually happen? And the second question is who is Jesus? Like, who is Jesus? Now, I say this every Easter, and I know that I do. And so if you've been around for a while, you've seen me do this. I'll do this every year until I'm like 95 years old and done, right? I get this. And part of the reason that I do it is that the images that we have concocted around what Christianity is always so fascinating, oftentimes humorous, and it's really interesting. So many of us grew up around versions of Christianity that are tethered to like really big, beautiful cathedral kind of things, which I actually love. Every time we visit like New York or somewhere like that, I love to go to the cathedrals. But there's like a piece of this that just feels so big and massive. And if we're really honest, it doesn't feel human as much. Like we went to Disney a few months ago, right? And if you know, like you went to like the castle, right? And every grown man looks at that and goes, yeah, I don't know about that. But then you get on Buzz Lightyear ride, and that's magic and wonder. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a little bit of that. Like there's a piece of that. And when you do this, you go like, hey, there's these things that just like pull stuff out of you, but it's not real, but it feels not human, right? And then we talk about Jesus in the same way. Like when we talk about Jesus, there's these versions of Jesus that are always interesting. I show a version of these every year, but like all of the images that often we talk about with Jesus, especially in Western culture, he's like a really good looking white dude with a great beard, long hair, herbal essence shampoo, and just for men. You know what I mean? Like he's doing great. He looks great. Jesus was not at all looking like this, right? We say this every year, almost do it for shock value at this point. Jesus was not a 30-something white dude from South Carolina, right? Right? A lot of scholars, they look at this. This isn't like an exact depiction of Jesus, but we could look from the men that would have been around his age during this time period. A group of scientists got together, like, when we look at this, these are the types of things that we would see in a man around this age during the season of life. He likely wasn't 6'4" and white with perfect hair. He came from the Middle East side of the world. Like, he's not that. He would have likely been shorter and stockier, and we know that because part of the story of the resurrection is that he was beaten, and then after he was beaten, carry his 75 to 100 pound piece of the cross, a much further distance than I would have before I got beaten. You know what I mean? Like, did not look like me. Like, there are pieces of this where he was a carpenter, and we see all, like, you can imagine like the roughness of hand, like all of these things play into a very different version of what we associate with Jesus. And what he does is he is born, again, tracking it all the way back, he's born to a woman, he grows up in a family, we know he has a half brother. Like, he's a person, he's a kid. Like my son the other day, he like skinned his knee, he got a strawberry. My gut says Jesus got a strawberry, you know what I mean? I kind of laugh about this. There's this picture that one Easter service I put up, and I almost did it as a parody, and I offended somebody, and I thought it was so helpful. They came up to me afterwards and said, hey, it's a little bit offensive, and it's I don't know if you've ever seen this, the laughing, have you ever seen the picture of Jesus like laughing? I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's like a fairly famous thing. Well, I put it up there and made a joke, not knowing that they were from our city, and the person who drew it was there, which is great. Welcome to our church. Anyway, and he said this, and it was such a great correction. He said, the reason I drew it that way is because, have you ever thought about Jesus laughing, like, and telling jokes? I'm like, no, I have not. Like, I don't know. Is it like the off? Like, what has he got, you know? He was a person. And he grew up to be a teacher and a rabbi, which, again, is not that uncommon for that area of the world. And he started teaching subversive things, which is not uncommon of rabbis. And he started speaking to the political structures, which is not uncommon of people that teach subversive things. And he had a group of people that followed him around, and that group of people that followed him around, disciples who were learning from him, again, not uncommon of rabbis, but what was uncommon of them is that they were kind of like the people who were slightly less educated and didn't make the cut in other places, like the Chicago White Sox. You know what I mean? There was a little bit like, sorry, I don't have any baseball fans that are into it. I just I'm pretty proud of these jokes. I'm going to keep them coming. Thank you so much. Yeah. The Angels, I don't know. Yeah, so like he had this group of people, and that was the thing that was different. But then he started doing miracles. And we started doing miracles, like, I mean, again, if you start doing like what feels like magic, people show up to see it. And he started teaching things that people liked some of the things that he was teaching, so the crowd started to follow. And as he's teaching these subversive things, specifically about the political environments that he was speaking to, he started talking about a new kingdom. And the assumption from the people that were closest to Jesus was this new kingdom was what they thought it would be, which was some version of violence and war and overtaking, and it would be this thing that now they would have power and control. And all of a sudden, this Savior starts claiming that he is not just a person, but also God, the Son of God, and also that he's going to usher in a new kingdom. And all of a sudden, it makes everybody a little bit butt clenchy, you know? And what he actually gets charged with and what he actually gets pulled away from is for that. But even that, and this is interesting, again, we don't talk about this a lot on this side of history, that is not abnormal for teachers during this time period in the ancient world who had a following. He was not the first person to say he's the Son of God. And so these things were sprouting up all up over, and as that happened, what they would do, and what Rome would do, is as these would come up, if they felt like it was a threat, there's an easy way to end the threat. You end the leader. And when you end the leader, people scatter. And so the night that they arrested him, again, it's so fascinating to me. When they arrested him, many of you have read this story before. I think it's simultaneously like violent and funny at the same time. Because they begin to arrest him, and one of Jesus' closest followers, who was a little bit impulsive, it's like your dumb friend a little bit, you know, pulls out and cuts off one of the guy's ears, which again, fascinating story. But the other part of the story that's so interesting that I think is also slightly awkward is then Jesus heals the guy. And I just imagine, like, can you imagine being the person who cut off the other guy's ear because we're going to go charge the hill, and then your leader goes, no, boop, and heals him, and then there's just an awkward silence. Do you know what I mean? Like, what happens after that, you know? Like, can you imagine, like, Peter and John looking at each other like, oh, man, you know what I mean? But here's what's interesting. Then they all scatter. And this is the part that's so interesting, and this is the part that tethers to 2026, is when you kill the leader, it ends. And if you kill the leader, part of the reason they all scatter is because if they'll do it to him, they'll do it to me. And then they all scatter. In fact, one of the writers in the New Testament talks about how one of Jesus' closest followers, slightly impulsive, scattered so much that when he went to the other side, I think this is so funny, when he goes to the other side, when he does this sort of thing, he has these like young middle school-ish girls that start calling him out, going, weren't you with them? Like, weren't you one of his followers? And he's so not nervous for them, but nervous for the entirety of what might happen to him, that he denies it over and over again and then feels guilty over and over again when he does. And so then they take Jesus, they charge him with this crime. Jesus is silent throughout a lot of this process. And then, without being overly graphic, but, you know, we have Nuvo kids, so a little bit, like, what they do to him is then they take a cat of nine tails. Many of you know this, which it gets sanitized in most versions. Like, it's not a spanking, you know, like they have these like strips of leather and they attach broken glass to it. Not to beat him with it so that he has stripes, but to have the glass inject itself into his body and pull out over and over and over again to be tortured. And then they give him this piece of the cross that we know that he carried. And the part that I think, again, gets lost in the story is, like, I'm a dad, so like when my kids get hurt, my initial response is, are you good? You know what I mean? Like, I care about them, but also like, I think I threw you down. You know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of that, you know? But like, when they get hurt in front of Emily, it's different as a mom, isn't it? Like, you feel this. And so much of this happened in front of his mom. Like, we see her very tethered to this story. And he carries this piece of the cross, and he goes to the cross, and he's often depicted in the pictures as if it's like this majestic, you know, high-ranking, you know, this high cross with all these things around him. And again, it was likely nothing like that. Like, there's no Braveheart music behind Jesus suffocating for hours on the cross next to two criminals. It's not what it was. And no one around him was expecting him to rise. Like, I think about that. I heard somebody teach on Mary's perspective from this years ago, and I'll never forget, like, if you think that your son is going to rise from the dead afterwards, it's gut-wrenching to watch, but there's still like a deep hope in it. But we don't get any indication from Mary that there's like this hope that he's coming back after this. I mean, none of those 12 disciples are around like hanging out. One of them's comforting Mary. But none of them are expecting a resurrection. You get these majestic images of the cross, but a lot of scholars would say that he was likely crucified like eye level so that people could walk by and spit on him, just as another layer to it. It's not majestic. There's no Braveheart music. there's very little beauty to it. It's just pain and suffering. And what happens over the course of that time period is he dies, and no one is expecting him to come back. No one. And a fairly wealthy individual comes by. They help him get the body off of the cross, which that in and of itself is just a hole. They nailed him to it. And they would have spent quite a bit of money to having him embalmed and put away and put into the tomb. And then we know that there were guards by the tomb to make sure that nobody could steal the body, again, politically, and say that he rose from the dead. Now, I say this all the time, so I know that every year it can almost feel like I heard that before, but if I was one of his closest followers and I had any inkling that he was coming back, I'm getting one of those slightly reclining foldable chairs, and I'm pulling out a cooler with whatever your choice of beverage is and a hot dog, and I'm sitting there on the third day going, this is going to be freaking awesome. You know what I mean? I'm inviting people over. We're handing out invitations. There is a Facebook invite group. We are showing up for this resurrection because if you think someone's going to rise from the dead, you kind of want to see it. And all these people wanted to see whatever this magic thing that he was doing anyway. No one was there. No one is waiting at the tomb for Jesus to knock the thing down, walk out like Mick Jagger, and say, what? No one. This is the day that there were no other followers of Jesus. And what we celebrate and what we look at and what we get excited about, what we sing about, is that the resurrection is what comes at the end of this deep pain that the world experienced. In the passage that we're going to look at today, we're going to look at just a couple of verses. It's in John chapter 20, and it's the story of one of his followers who's a woman, one of the least credible people to show up into the story to talk about what's going on. And she shows up, and it's almost funny what happens in the midst of the story. But John captures the story. Here's what he says. He says, so Mary stood outside the tomb crying. And again, I think this is interesting, which is a very different posture. She's crying because she doesn't expect him to come back. She's crying because he's dead, right? Crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. I don't know about angels. I don't know how that works. I've never seen one. I don't think it's like Tess from Touched by an Angel. 90s kids, what's up? I don't know what an angel's like. I don't know what that is, but there were entities there that it seems like interacted with her. And so they asked her, they said, woman, why are you crying? Why are you crying? And what she responds with, again, is fascinating in the narrative, because if you're rewriting this narrative to, I don't know how to say this well, to make your point, you don't use her, and you don't show the depth of her humanity, I don't think. This is not that convincing. What she says next is this. She says, they have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they've put him, which I think, again, is fascinating. She sees two entities that she can't fully describe, and she goes, look, they took him away, and there's a little implication here, wait a minute, where'd you put him? You know what I mean? He's not here anymore. She's not expecting that he rose from the dead, right? And then at this, there's this pivotal moment of the story that I think is so beautiful, it's so fascinating. It ends with one word. But here's what it says. It says, at this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. Now, I don't have a great explanation from this. There's only been one time that I can remember crying so hard I couldn't see straight. And the Braves won the World Series that year, 1995, and it was pretty great. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that. I'm going to keep going with the baseball jokes until I make you laugh. I'm committed at this point. I don't know if that's it. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe the traumatic responses that she's felt. I don't know. But she doesn't recognize him. Just doesn't recognize him. And so Jesus asks her, he says, woman, why are you crying? And then he adds this part. It's a little bit different than the others. He said, who is it that you're looking for? Who's it that you're looking for? And the next part of the verse is so interesting to me. I love the beauty of this. And it's the detail of this is so fascinating. It says this. It says, thinking that he was the gardener. She said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him and I'll get him. Now, can you just for a second, let's pause for a second. Can you imagine the person that throughout history is remembered as looking at Jesus after his death and resurrection and going, hey, are you the gardener? Do you know what I mean? And also, where the freak did you put him? You know what I mean? Like, where's he at? Where did you put him? She looks at Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, goes, I don't know where he is. What did you do with him? You know? And what happens next, and this is the word where it all changes, and it's so powerful for her. I love Jesus' response to her. The scripture says, literally, he just looks at her and he just says her name. He says, Mary. And this in the story is like the pivotal moment where it all feels like it breaks open. It's like she realizes it. It's like the cinematic moment. Everything happens all at once. And she turns around and she looks at him and she calls him by what she would have called him by. She said, look, teacher. And all of a sudden she realized, and don't miss this, that what she wasn't expecting to be true was true. And that he actually was who he said that he was. There's this quote by Leonard Sweet that I absolutely love. It's a longer one, but I want to read it to you because he gives this beautiful picture of what this actually is. He says this. He says, there's this magic moment in time when only one person in the whole world, one person walking planet Earth, knew the good news of he's alive. The ultimate breaking news that would forever change the course of humanity. And for that brief, sacred instance, this one person was the entirety or the whole church. The whole Jesus story hinged on what that one person would do with the truth. Would she cherish it and keep it to herself, or would she share it with others and become, now don't miss this, I love this, the apostle to the apostles, which is why we let women preach. Anyway, so there's a little bit of like, when you look at this, and you go like, for one brief moment, the entirety of the gospel truth was held by one of the least likely individuals to hold it. And she would go back to the other people who had scattered all over. And if you've never read this, if you haven't read it intently, you should go back and see what she does and see their reactions and where everybody goes. She goes back and she tells them, and all of a sudden it begins to spread. Now don't miss this. And they begin to believe not because they mustered it up and not because they clenched and had enough faith. They begin to believe because of what they saw to be true. And it began to be passed on and passed on. And then all of a sudden, Jesus shows up. And what's fascinating about this, I say this every year because I think it's interesting. You can track this. I love it in the text. Jesus shows up to all of these people, and the writers of the New Testament begin to reference these people and where they were at and where they lived. Like, oh yeah, this person saw him, and this person saw him. In such an easy way where they would have all been living, where you could go verify it with somebody else. And it began to be passed on, and don't miss this. Not that Christianity was born. They wouldn't even use that language. Not even, and don't miss this, that the new kingdom Messiah, like not that, no. They started saying that he was dead, and he's not dead anymore. And if he's not dead anymore, it changes everything. Everything. And the reason this matters so much, and the reason why I like to talk about this part of Easter and why I think it's so beautiful is this, that the tension that you feel with Jesus' closest followers is the same one that many of us feel today, and that's this. Nobody believed the resurrection until they saw the resurrected Jesus. And when they saw the resurrected Jesus, they believed. And that's where it all hinges from. That's why taking the morality of Christianity or the cherry-picked morality of Christianity and applying it to your own agnosticism and making yourself God isn't actually Christianity. It's just you being a better person. And you know what's hard? Jesus didn't just call you to be a better person. In fact, Jesus is teaching, the writings of the New Testament, people that would follow. He calls you to die. He calls you to come to him open-handedly and say, I give you my life. Not the version of it that's sanitized, not the cherry-picked version, not the I'm really God in my own universe kind of thing. No, that's not Christianity. Those are interesting things. It's not Christianity. Christianity says that it all hinges on the resurrection. And if Jesus died on the cross and he rose from the dead, don't miss this. He's not just trying to make you better. Your podcast can do that. I can give you 60 books that'll help you do that. You can be better. You're already better. You're great. Look at you. You do fantastic. You all look good too. It's all great. You can be better. Jesus calls you to die and become new. And the resurrection story is that Jesus takes the brokenness, the sin, all of it, and he makes it new. And come on, don't miss it. Anything short of that is an interesting version of you being religious. It's just not Christianity. He wants you. And so I grew up in context. I'll tell you how this works. The band can come on back up. I'll do this. Where at the end of Easter sermons in particular, there was like a version of like, and then pray this prayer, and then, and I think that's great, and I think you should, and all those things. For those of you in the room who are agnostic or atheist, or you've deconstructed your faith, or you're like in that camp, can I just say, like, what I wish I could say to you is that at the end of the day, I say as well, maybe you're right. But I think there's a part of this, I say as well, that you kind of wish it were true. And there's a part of you that I think if you wish a little bit that it were true, that you would lean into it a little bit more. I'm a huge podcast fan. Anybody listen to Stephen Bartlett? Do you guys know Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO? Anybody ever listen to that? If not, you should. Yeah. It's one of my favorite podcasts. Stephen Bartlett is phenomenal. I think he would say he's agnostic. You might be. He's certainly not a follower of Jesus because he's saying that. But he was saying I think he would say he's agnostic. And what he says in this interview recently is he interviewed an apologist, which is fascinating. Who's like a doctorate of like historical evidence, all that kind of stuff. And his questions are phenomenal. Right? And he gets after the heart of all of these like objections, and he's asking in a way that he's not trying to make a point. He's just like genuinely curious about his faith. And so the guy who's interviewing is a guy named Wes Huff, who gives him all this sort of stuff. But it's very interesting. But in the midst of it, he said this. He said, how do we know that these aren't just stories? Because there are these like discrepancies. I feel like there's like these different perspectives, and all this kind of stuff. How do we know that they're not just stories that are made up? And I thought about this. I thought one of his answers were so interesting. How many of you, and this is kind of tough to say, you don't have to answer if you want. How many of you were alive in like 2001? Anybody remember 2001? Like September 11th, 2001. This is one of the references that he gives. I think it's so interesting. And his response to this is like, I describe September 11th, 2001 probably very differently than you would. And all the details, they're probably going to be factual, but they're going to be from a very different lens. And part of that is what makes this human experience and this thing so interesting. And I told you this reason, I was like in 7th grade. Don't judge me. That's how old I am. And I came home. I watched the second plane hit. And I remember coming home and I was describing this recently to some people who were much younger who weren't alive then. And they're like, yeah, I heard it from this person. They described this story. And then we started like sort of all comparing where we were and what the experience was like. And I thought to myself, I was like, it was so interesting that there's like one thing on the ejection side of this isn't just like explainable, but it's like expected. There are pieces of the text where you go like, oh, but it's not all like, I'm like, yeah, but it's not written to be a science book. It's written to communicate something about God that's so powerful. These are real people with real stories who laugh and skin their knee and look at Jesus and say probably words that you and I would probably say too, and go, wait a minute. And Mary looked at this completely confused, because that's what happens when somebody you've been following dies, and it's traumatic. And you get all of these glimpses into real human beings. And what's hard about being a Christian sometimes, you are around church or around religious things, and it feels so not human. But when you read the text through human eyes, you begin to understand that it is absolutely so powerful and so beautiful. And that Jesus' love for you and Jesus' love for me and what it says about the God of the universe and how badly he wants you to know him and love him, not so that you can be good, you're already good, but so that you can be new and free. Like that thing is different. And so, 11 o'clock, y'all get all the fun stuff. When we started our church, one of the prayers that we would pray all the time is that people who had intellectual barriers to Christianity wouldn't just respond emotionally, but would intellectually try to figure out what they think about it. And so here's what I would say to you if that's you. And even if you're somebody who's been a follower of Jesus since like Flannel Graph and DC Talk and Audio Adventure, like you get all those, but you've sort of disconnected from the beyond natural components of it. What I wish I could say to you is this, is that around 9/11, after all that happened, a massive version of like new atheist movement and very articulate, very fascinating and brilliant human beings, started a movement that moved this in a direction where it seems like Christianity is either both harmful or not true. And can I just say this? I grew up in that. I grew up with that logic. I went through a lot of that stuff. But what I wish I could tell you is this. If the vast majority of your training in your mind around religious things is from that, can I just tell you this? And there's still a longing where you're missing some of the meaning. There's a reason that you are, because there's an end point to where that gets you. And on the other side of that, I really do believe this, is not you becoming a better person through the morality of Christianity. It's by making Jesus Lord of your life. And you don't have to have it all figured out. We'll talk about Noah later. That would be fun for me, you know? But it really all hinges on, is this true? And who is Jesus? And what I wish you would do is, if you're in that camp, is that whole wave of objection. And then for many people, and this is me including, a lot of bad middle theology that people who wear like Britney Spears mics like me talk about with the Bible that's not very good, helpful, or intellectual in the middle, right? I wish you could take all of that and then on the other side of it go, but I want to do the research on thoughtful people who are intelligent, smart human beings who have said this. You ready? That Jesus is Lord. That the resurrection is true. That there is a wave of people who believe that, and it's not because they checked their brains at the door. It's because there's a reason to believe. The last thing I want to say is this, and then we'll wrap up our service in a second. If you're a follower of Jesus, and you can live your life without any sort of dependence on the beyond natural workings of Jesus and what he did for you, practically you're in the exact same camp as a person who's not a follower of Jesus. And what I wish I could tell you is this, and when we were planning our church, this is somebody said, the hardest thing that you'll ever teach people in the specific area that we're teaching it is to become fully dependent on God, because they don't have to feel that a lot. What I wish I could tell you is this, that not a better version of you, it's not just that, but the actual fullness to your life is actually found when you say, I believe it, I submit to it, and you are Lord. Take all of it, I will follow you. And if you haven't done that, or if you're not living that way, my call to you today is to go, I'm going to put a stake in the ground and go, I want to live that way now. So I'm going to ask you if you would, I'd love for you to stand up real quick. It's so interesting here. Usually at the high school it's like, so it's kind of weird not to have that. I kind of missed it, that part. I don't know. Yeah. What we're going to do today, the wrap up our time together, is we're gonna sing a song that's very celebratory of what Jesus did on our behalf. If you're hearing your follower of Jesus, I'm gonna ask you to do this. I'm gonna ask you to sing this out as passionately, as loud. How many of you are bad singers? Do we have bad singers in the room? Oh, we know. Just go ahead and admit it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you to sing this out and sing it as a prayer. And that's great, because this is like a moment in our church every year where we get to just celebrate what he did on our behalf. And if you're here not a follower of Jesus, I would also say this. This is a great moment for you to sneak out. And I know that, you know that, we all know that. But I would also say this. What you're going to see over the next couple of minutes is one of the most complete pictures of what we believe theologically about who Jesus is, what he did for us, and what that means about us. And if for nothing else for the next couple of minutes, I'd love for you to look at these lyrics and let that be a part of your experience today. What do these lyrics actually mean for me and for our lives? And so the first song we're going to sing is an old hymn that I grew up hearing my mom play on the piano and sing as a kid. It talks about nothing but the blood of Jesus. And then the next song we're going to sing is a celebratory song about what he did on our behalf. So let me pray for us real quick. Father, we thank you so much for what you did for us. We thank you for this truth. We thank you for the weight of it. We thank you for the power in it. We thank you that throughout history, God, your gift to us has been extraordinary. That we can know you, that we can follow you, that we can experience you, and that you want a relationship with us. And so I just ask that today, no matter where we are on the spectrum of spirituality or of faith, and I pray that you continue to reveal yourself to us. One of the prayers I pray every Sunday, God, you know this is for the person in the room who's like the furthest or like the most walled up or the most intellectual barriers, whatever those things are. My prayer for those people or that person is, God, that they would just do the full work of understanding the other sides of the argument, and at bare minimum, God, being able to articulate both. And God, I pray that in the midst of that both intellectually and in their mind and their heart, that you speak to them clearly and that you lead them to you. I pray for everybody in the room who would say that they're a follower of Jesus, and they mean it, but it's been a long time since they've felt the weight of the resurrection in their heart and their life. God, I pray that today would be something that moves them forward closer to you. And I pray that a year from now, the 400, 500 people that have been here at some point today, God, I just pray that we would be marked as being people who are dependent upon you, and we would watch you do through us what only you could do. God, that you would help us a year from now to look back and just have a deep affection for who you are. It's in Jesus' name we pray.